MD, it's always a pleasure. Good to see you.
Great to be with you, Carl.
Walk me through what you're going to say next week and how much of an upgrade were we in for prior to hostilities?
Well, what I would say next week is that all roads go into higher inflation, slower growth. But how much that would be depends on whether the ceasefire holds and turns into a durable peace, and how much is the infrastructure damage already done. This shock, we know, is a negative supply shock. It means it pushes prices up, and whether that would go to a territory that requires central banks to intervene would really depend on how long it goes. A shorter duration, relatively mild impact, possible for central banks to look through that. A longer duration, inflation starts flashing red signs, then central banks have to step in. And of course, we know that means that growth will suffer even more. You asked me how much we were going to upgrade. Not by much. We were looking at 0.1% lift of our growth projections. And now we are going to be talking about different scenarios. We will present 3 scenarios, depending again on these factors. And I want to stress something very important. This crisis is global, but it is very asymmetric. Countries feel the heat of it differently. If you are in the zone of hostilities, that hits you the most. If you are an oil importer, far away, you can't get even the quantities you need, that hits you a lot. If you are an exporter, like the United States, you are in a much more protected position. Poor countries, all importers, are in a very tough spot. And for them, we are ready to help if it is necessary.
I was going to ask you about your expectations for IMF support, food insecurity. I would assume countries in Southeast Asia and maybe to a lesser extent Europe will be under the most duress.
The countries that are most severely impacted, indeed, they are in Asia, and these are Asian countries with weak reserves. So you have to differentiate. You may be an energy importer in Asia, like Japan or China, but you have very high oil and gas reserves. You're more protected. If you are the Philippines or Thailand, where your reserves are very tiny, then already you see rationing of fuel. When we look at Europe, Europe has done a great job during the Ukraine war shock. They have reduced their dependency on Russian gas very quickly, and they put in place many diversification measures, energy efficiency measures. But now, again, we see in Europe some of the countries that are oil and gas importers, they don't have much of any other protection being affected. And then comes when we talk about Asia, you take countries like Sri Lanka or Bangladesh that are in a vulnerable place to begin with, and now that vulnerability is increased. Fortunately, for many of these countries, we already have in place programs. We have a program with Sri Lanka, we have a program for Bangladesh, we have programs for many of the Middle East countries like Egypt, Jordan, that are in need of support. We have programs in Latin America, some of the countries that are importers and affected. And when we look at the likely demand, we put it somewhere between $20 and $50 billion additional financing. And I can tell you that next week we will be talking with many of these countries, those that have programs but need to augment them, to strengthen their defense, those that are in need of programs. Some of them are in Africa. Many countries in Africa find themselves energy importers with very little or no fiscal space. And that is a very important message for everybody. The world as a whole has a problem with fiscal space. We have been borrowing, that has gone up, that service costs up, and now we are faced with another shock with very little space to act upon it.
Yeah, how does that hamstring various policymakers, whether from the central banks or from the governments themselves? Global sovereign debt levels around $110 trillion. Of course, about half of that is just the U.S. and China combined. But if you say all roads lead to stagflation and we have all of this debt out there, sovereign debt, does that limit the ability to actually, take measures to fight off that stagflation?
So there is a piece of good news, you may call it, on this front, which is we don't want governments to provide too much in fiscal support to begin with. Why? Because you give more money to people, demand goes up, supply is constrained, that only pushes inflation up. Actually, what we are telling people is don't put your foot on the accelerator with fiscal support, and the other one on the brakes with tightening interest rates. You're going to crush your economy. But this being said, we still have vulnerable populations that need some support. It has to be targeted and it has to be temporary. Why we need that? Because we know energy prices hit people very strongly, and we have seen in the past that may lead to actually protests, social unrest. So governments have to watch that as well. For central banks, right now, if this ceasefire turns into durable peace, they may be in a position to signal we are ready to raise rates, but not actually have to do it. If we don't get the relief of peace, and if inflation starts going up, we are already seeing inflation expectations moving upward, then central banks have to be prepared to act. Very delicate time to be a central banker.
Yes. MD, we'll look forward to the meetings next week, at least watching them, and we always appreciate you helping us understand the curtain raiser. Thanks so much.
Thank you.